Before we get started, I'm extremely proud to say that this episode of The Petrified Comedian was brought to you by 4x3. 4x3 is an independent media company creating comedy content on YouTube. This week, they dropped a new full comedy special by Jamal Gushan, Down to Clown, and an episode of their podcast on a related note with comedian Remy Casimir. Support independent comedy at youtube.com/@FOURXTHREE. Or by looking up 4x3 on YouTube. Please enjoy the show. Aisha Alfa is an LA-based comedian and actor. She's had roles in shows like Degrassi and The Beaverton, and she recently starred as Caroline in the true crime comedy based on a true story, streaming now on Peacock. Check out her stand-up special, All the Parts, on YouTube. Aisha, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome. Yeah.
So I practiced. I had this feeling that would happen. I practiced so much because I've known Aisha.
I know everyone does. I know. Yeah. Everyone's like, Aisha. Well, what is it? And I'm like, it's just Aisha. Yeah, it's all good.
Perfect. So I start out with a question that I think is every one of my guests' least favorite question that I ask, which is, if you could describe your comedy in 3 words, what would they be?
Hopefully I'm funny. Those are my 3 words.
I think those would be my 3 words too right now.
I mean, I think it's so hard because my comedy is I'm silly. And I find myself to be a very performative. I'm not a dry comic. I'm not a Twitter funny one-liner quips. I'm like, oh my gosh, did this really anything happen?
Yeah.
And I think also maybe relatable. Although I'm talking a lot about, being a woman or being mixed race or an immigrant or a mom, I do those jokes in front of all kinds of audiences. And generally, I think people can find something to relate to in what I'm saying because it's less about the thing and more about the experience. So yeah, silly, performative, and relatable. I don't know if those are good, but that's kind of I think it's true.
I think they're great, and I think that one of the awesome things, to an extent, there's a lot of people who say comedy is oversaturated right now, which to an extent you can say that, you can make that case, and it is true. But what being oversaturated means is we have pretty much every perspective you could possibly imagine going up and giving their story, and even when you're like you said, you're coming as a woman, as an immigrant, as a mixed race person, for people to not connect with you as who you are, but still connect with you as what you go through, I think is an awesome thing that comedy can do.
Yeah, we've all felt embarrassed, or we've all felt angry, or misunderstood, which I think is really the message of a lot of things. But it's so funny, this idea of comedy being oversaturated is such a funny concept to me because I'm like, what? What do you mean oversaturated? I feel like it's this is maybe going to be mean, but I'm like, is that just all the cis white dudes who want to tell dick jokes who are like, oh, it's not just us anymore? And you're like, okay, there's just other people, right? It's so funny to me, oversaturated. But yeah, there's different perspectives, that's for sure, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, not to call anyone out, but I've definitely heard that from my clan a little more than other people.
You can't be a white man. You can't be a white man and say clan. You can't do that. That's good.
That's true.
You're going to have to really reel that one back when talking to Black women. You know what I mean? You can't.
Yeah, well, who's to say if that will even make it into this podcast? But
it's going to be me and my friends and family. You're just going to voice over that one part. I really hope that's what happens. It'd be
amazing. I'm gonna let someone with a completely different voice it over for me, so yes. People know I messed up, but they just don't know how.
Yeah. Create some mystery with what you're, with the flubs. That's good.
So I've watched your special, All the Parts, a couple of times.
Oh,
how
awesome.
did you end up getting Bill Burr to introduce you?
Bill is a friend of mine from comedy here. And it was his production company, All Things Comedy. He and Al Madrigal started that production company. All Things Comedy is the production company that produced my special and my album. So he, as a favor to me and like as like a vouch for me, came and started the night out. And it's so funny. I always say this because people are like, "Oh my gosh, Bill Burr opened for you," and I was like, "No, you wildly insane human being! Like, obviously, Bill Burr did not open for me." And as a joke, the Dynasty Typewriter, which is the theater I did in, as a joke, they put on the marquee Aisha Alfa, and then featuring Bill Burr, really small, and like we have a picture of it. But like, he's just like, he's a big supporter of comedy and comedians, and he wanted to be there and get the night going and lend his name to it, and I am eternally grateful for it. And also, it's like every time people talk about my album, they're like, "Oh my god, like what did you do to get Bill there?" And I was like, "What do you like?" I don't know what people like imagine. They're like, "Oh my gosh, did you like pay him a bunch of money? Did you like kidnap him? Did you like what happened?" And I was like, we just know each other, and he's a very lovely human being, so he did me a solid."
And it's funny because I don't think any art style confuses the general public more, because everybody sort of assumes what they're seeing on stage is just what you get. But when
Yeah.
you hear Bill Burr interviewed, you can tell he's obviously a bit of a rough guy in terms of his comedy. Like he's a bit abrasive, you could say, but you can tell he's just got this love for comedy and for other
Yeah.
comedians that I think
Yeah.
you exemplify that in what you said.
He's phenomenal. I mean, there was a series called The Ringers, and it was his show where it was like he was introducing comedians that he liked and thought were like new up and comers. And I think that there would have been an ability for someone with a name like Bill Burr to have a show like that, have somebody else totally produce it and pick these people and be like, "Here's who you're going to have. Here's their intro. Just say it." And for him to not have any contact. But that's not what it was. Like, he sat down with everybody. He knew everybody. He got to know people. He has like
Wow.
done shows with them, but like, Steph Tolev, who is a Canadian comedian who's down here, like killing it. He thought she was hilarious. He had her on that show. She's opened for him a bunch. She has a podcast now at All Things Comedy Studio. Like, he cares about comedy. And, he is very funny, and he is like, he says what he says, and doesn't apologize, which I think is awesome. And also, like, a lot of the things he says are quite complex, I think, in the end. And he actually is like kind of subverting messages and like saying
Mhm.
things and making fun, like satirizing a lot of stuff that he's talking about. So it's kind of this magical thing where he gets people from both sides of the center being like, "Yeah, he's one of us." And it's like, "No, wait a minute, he's one of us." And you're like, "Which one is he?" Like, he just like lives this like thing. But he is a genuinely like cool, solid, lovely person. So he can get away with saying a lot of things that like nobody should be able to get away with saying, but then he does it because he's so honest and lovable and authentic. It's great.
I can remember, I think the first time I was exposed to Bill, I was probably 11 or 12, and it definitely a little too early to be hearing his material. So my dad hears Bill Burr in the other room, and he comes in, he's like, "Who the hell are you listening to? Go to bed. Like, get out of here. Stop this." So I go up to bed, and then I come down like 15 minutes later, and my dad's sitting there watching him.
Of
It's
course,
just like,
of
yeah,
course. Yeah, yeah. He's like, many generations love his comedy. So
absolutely.
I opened for him at a show, and like literally the audience was like people from like under 18 probably all the way to like 60 or 70. Like, there's just like this huge demographic that is fans of Bill Burr.
Yeah, and I think that just speaks to how amazing of a comedian he really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were very nice enough to give me sort of a list of people to reach out to and get some stories about you. So I heard mention of a story from your days in
Can I
Winnipeg.
say this though? This one of my girlfriends, I saw her the other day, and she goes, "Okay, is this person legit or is this like a scam?" And I was like, "No, no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine." Because she was just like, "Yeah, I didn't want to like respond back if I didn't know." I'm like, "No, I get it," and he's fine. I was very nice about it.
Well, yeah, and I try to give everyone the opportunity to choose whether or not I go into that, because it
Yeah.
is a bit strange. but it leads to some great moments on the podcast.
I know. I'm like, I want to hear what people had to say.
So I heard mention of a story from your days in Winnipeg that involves drinking a little too much after a show and waking up with some extra Burger King.
Oh my gosh. You know, like I started in Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada, and um I love Winnipeg. I'm just gonna put that out there. Winnipeg is my like it's I'm a 204 girl. That's my hometown. All the guys I started with there are my homies, like my OG comedy homies. I still love them all. And there's a Winnipeg Comedy Festival, which is this amazing festival. But it's it's a festival where they're bringing in big names into the city to do this huge festival, which is amazing. And then the locals, we're all trying to get on these shows, and it's very difficult because they'll kind of have a local show or whatever. We don't really get paid, but we get to go to the parties and this kind of thing. So it's like
Mm.
you're kind of just like the aftermath, whatever. But of course, as a new up and coming comedian, we were all like so excited to be on these shows and so excited to go to the after parties, and we would like drink. And I had this condo right in like sort of the heart of the city. So my place was often the go back to. So like the after party's done, the after party's done, and then people would end up back at my house. And I kind of still, but like in my heyday, I'm like, I should have been a spokesperson for Burger King, because a Whopper with cheese at the end of the night is like my favorite thing in the world. Like to this day still, it's one of my things. I see the commercial and I'm like instantly drooling. But we used to go and do these like trips with everybody afterwards to Burger King and then come back to mine and like have beer and wine and whatever. And if people wanted to stay, they could stay on the couch or the floor. It was like sort of like a crash pad. But like consistently for the whole festival, every night I would wake up with like, comedians are heathens. Like, have I eaten like Whopper behind my couch or under a pillow, and like glasses of wine spilt on, like it was just like disgusting. And I'm like, this is my home. Like I had to wake up to this after, it was just so ridiculous. So to this day, we often talk about like when we're all gonna get together, it's like, no, we gotta hit the Burger King and like go back and do some Whoppers behind a cushion or something like that. Luckily now I'm not waking up with like a Whopper with cheese squished against my face anymore, but I still would have all those guys over for an after party for sure.
That's amazing. So, what's it like doing corporate gigs for lawyers?
Oh my gosh, you definitely talked to Mike Green. Yeah, corporate. I think most comedians will tell you that corporate gigs they're lucrative. Like you make a lot of money
Mhm.
doing them usually, and also it's a little bit of selling your soul,
Yeah.
because it's not like a club where you can just say whatever, and you often are doing these gigs at like a conference, which is not the best environment for comedy. I'll just put that out there, or at whatever. So again, in Winnipeg, Mike Green and I got contacted by this woman, and she was a woman of color who was a lawyer at this firm, and she loved comedy, huge comedy fan. So she's like, I want to hire you. This is going to be amazing. It was like a good chunk of change, like weirdly good chunk of change, and that should always be the key. If you're not that
Yeah.
good and you're getting paid a lot, I'm like, what's the gig? Why are you paying me such money to come? But so I was like, okay, Greener, like, let's go do this. You can come and start off the night, and then I'll do the longer set, and we'll kind of like split the cash. And we go to this event, and I kid you not, it's like all old, crusty white dudes. And I say that with
Yeah.
love, okay? I say that with love, but they could not have been older or crustier. And she was
Yeah.
one of the very few women and the only person of color other than Mike, who is Jewish and Chinese, and me, and I am black, mixed woman. So like we're like, what the actual fuck is happening right now? There's no other performers. There's no like joy to this event. It was actually, I think it was like a year-end event where they were celebrating the like head of the firm, who
Mm.
was like dying. Like he was in a wheelchair. It was very morbid. It was like a horrible setup. And then we got to the thing, and the woman was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are here! I'm so excited." She hadn't told anyone that she was having comedy. So all these people came to like have dinner and go home. And she's like, "Oh, it's gonna be so great! I can't wait! I love your comedy." She's like, "Get some drinks, have some food. It'll start in like an hour." And Mike and I are like, we felt like we're in like The Twilight Zone or like Get Out or something, even though that movie hadn't come out then. But we went to the bar to get a drink, and literally people were like giving us dirty looks and like edging us out, being like, sorry, this is a private event. Like people were telling
Yeah.
us we were in the wrong place, we should leave. We're like, no, no, like we're the entertainment. And then people were like giving us glasses because they thought we were the help. Like it was so funny to us. And then we go on this stage, and she's like, guys, surprise, we're going to have a comedy show. And everyone, like, you could, like, feel the groan and moan of, like, no. And Mike went up and, like, did his best. And then I went up and did my best. And, like, nothing hit. She was laughing hysterically at everything. And everyone else was like, we hate you. And, like, I remember the only bit that I got, like, an uproarious laughter from was when I talked about my mom, how I'm mixed. My dad's black, my mom's white. And I talked about how white my mom is. And I was like, she's just about as white as everyone in this room. And that was the only bit, which usually isn't a part of the joke, but that was the biggest hit of my whole set because they're like, oh, we're white. Oh. Like they loved it. And we just like ate shit. And then the woman was none the wiser. She was like, great set, guys. We loved it. Like she just was so clueless. We went and cashed our checks and then rode bicycles to a house party. And I had a sleepover on his floor in his parents' home. And like, we were just like, what is life about? You know what I mean? Like, sure, we made some money, but like, did we just sell our souls for cash? Like, it was just so ridiculous. But, it's like, that's the fun of comedy in that comedy is such an individual career and profession. You go up on stage by yourself, you're expressing your own specific points of view. So it is very singular in that nature, but you create this community with other comedians who you get to know and you get to love. And, Mike Green is definitely one of my favorite friends in life, and also that I met from comedy. And that memory is just such a beautiful golden moment in my life as a performer that I'm happy it happened, even though that night we were both just like kind of trying to think about what life was like. It was a very existential moment, but it's like things like telling that story is what is the cutting our teeth to get to where we are now. That was worth it.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like the main issue is you were not crusty or white enough for that crowd. So.
Absolutely not. Had I known, I would have just brought my mom with me on stage and been like, white lady, just like you guys.
They would have been like, ha, 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 yes, just like us.
Totally. Yeah. It would have, I got to ask those questions next time.
So, what was it like living in Korea?
It was amazing. I mean, I think I had this whole other life before I got into stand-up comedy and acting, where
Really
I was a
sounds like
professional
it.
soccer player. Yeah, I played soccer professionally. I played in a men's league in Korea. I taught English. I, was a wedding planner. I was a professional life coach. I did a whole lot of stuff. And this stint of life, I spent 4 years in South Korea. I went over, originally I went over to play in the World University Games when I was still playing soccer, and had a great time and loved it. And then I moved back to Canada and was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And one of my friends who was living there was like, you should just move to Korea. And, I was, I don't know, 21 or something. And I was like, well, I can't just pick up and move across the country, like the world. Like, that's crazy. And he spent the weekend with me. He was traveling through Canada, spent the weekend with me. And then as we like spent the weekend together, I was like, yeah, that's crazy. Right? Like, I can't do that, can I? And it turned into this question, and then it turned into this statement of, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to leave my job. I don't have kids. I don't have anything holding me back here. So I went into work and gave less than 2 weeks notice, packed up, and moved to Korea.
Were you just on your own out there?
My friend Eric, who had come through Canada, and that's the one who, presented this opportunity. I lived in his tiny little apartment for the first couple months, and then I got my own. But he was a friend of mine, and then through him and through playing soccer for the men's league and for playing Gaelic football, I met a wonderful network of amazing people who we were all expats living so far away from home. So it really felt like we had family because we were all in the same situation. And some of them Yeah, one of them was in my wedding party. One of my closest friends I met in
Oh wow.
Korea. Um, but it was this really wild time where Korea is just like this crazy place where it's so
Hmm.
like tech forward. Like there's so much, they're so advanced in so many ways,
Hmm.
and it's so like different in certain ways. Like it's a very Confucius culture. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's like the oldest person is the one who makes the rules no matter what. Like they don't have in their court system. I don't know if this is true still, but like they'd have like a jury of your peers because there would be no jury of your peers because if someone was older in the jury, they would just defer to that person because that's the Confucius culture. Is like the eldest is the most wise, so you just that's who decides everything.
Wow. That's really
So
interesting.
yeah, so it's just really, it was very different and really freeing because I was playing sports to a high level. I kind of worked and made a ton of money and could travel all over Asia really cheaply and easily. Korean food is still to this day one of my passionate soul
Yeah.
foods of my life.
Same.
So yeah, it's so, oh, I love it. So it really was a defining part of my life. And then it was really the part where I ended my career as an athlete mentally and physically and kind of was like, yeah, I don't think I want to do this anymore as my main
Hmm.
focus. And that's when I left and traveled and went home and started all these other things I wanted to do. But it's like this is like the your my life in flashbacks kind of moment, but it definitely was a beautiful part of like creating the me that I am now of being very
Yeah.
independent and adventurous and making decisions for myself. And yeah, it was wonderful. I love Korea. So I mean, I don't think I could ever live there for my life, but I would love to
Hmm.
go back mostly to see a few friends and then just eat food for like a week straight.
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
good.
Yeah. I would eat my weight in bulgogi.
Yes. Oh, bulgogi. Have you ever had takalbi? It's like the
No.
kalbi, but it's like
Oh,
spicy
I've had galbi.
chicken. Yeah, kalbi. So takalbi
Oh
is a
yes.
chicken version that's like spicy chicken and like the rice
Hmm.
cakes and like vegetables and stuff. That's my all time. I used to travel to different places in Korea just to go eat takalbi and then travel back. Like it was silly. I'm like food
That
obsessed, but
no, that's amazing. I mean, if you have the opportunity, you're not, you're living there. Then you might as
yeah,
well live it up.
yeah. Oh, I lived it up. Oh, I lived it up. Nothing closes there until people leave. So there'd be like the club is open until whenever everyone leaves. So you would be like dancing and you'd leave out and it's like 9 in the morning. And you're like, oh snap, I should have left. But then like you can go for like a full galbi meal at like 4 in the morning. It's a wild, wild place. It's great. I
That's
loved it.
amazing. That sounds like a
Hmm.
lot of fun.
It was. It was at that time.
So you mentioned briefly, but did you enjoy being a life coach?
Yeah, I was actually just talking about this, how I think that I got into that because it's part of who I am is I'm a positive person. I am optimistic. I believe in people. I am like the biggest champion for people. I love that stuff. Like that's my
Mhm.
jam is getting excited for people and seeing their dreams and like being like, yes, you can do this. Let's remove blockages. Let's like get you there and authentically helping people. Which I think sometimes makes me feel like I don't fit in comedy because I sort of
Mm.
had this idea that in comedy you have to be cynical, you have to sort of be skeptical, and I don't think I am by nature. But what I'm realizing more and more is that's okay. And if I'm the
Yeah,
more me I can be, the better I am at everything I'm doing, including my comedy, including acting, momming, friending, like all the things. But yeah,
I,
it's a very funny life coaching is such a funny profession where I had people who I worked almost exclusively with super successful independent badass women who were like
mhm.
executives in companies and doing big things, um, and then a few guys and a few people who weren't like that level but who were like working on stuff. But when I started out, because it's such a there's no like regulating body like there is for
Mhm.
therapy or for being a nurse or something like that. So anybody can be a life coach. I was certified by a coaching company, but some of when you're trying to promote what you're doing, and as a young woman, I got so many people who were interested in coaching, and these are big air quotes I'm putting on this, who were
Mm.
interested in having an affair is really what it turns out to be. Where I'm just
Oh
like,
gosh.
they're like, "What? I'm paying you for this hour," and I'm like, "I'm not a prostitute, though. This is different. Like, it's different than okay." So it's like a very funny. I think
Gosh.
it helped me kind of get to what I wanted and being very clear and outspoken about that early on because I didn't want to have to deal with. Let's just say it. It's a real theme here. Old crusty white dudes trying to put their hands on me.
They are the worst.
They are. I mean, there's some great ones out there, but you know what I mean. Like, come
Of
on, some of
course.
these guys.
I mean, none come to mind, but but I'm sure they're out there.
hmm
So, and just to touch on that, you mentioned like you're a very positive person, and I think that that has really shined through in the few interactions we've had, but also the podcast you created called the Shout Out Show. I really
Yeah,
love the idea of that show. Just you and fellow comedian Sophia Zolan were highlighting things that you just liked, which I think is
yeah,
such a wonderful thing people don't do enough.
yeah. So, I mean, if people don't know Sophia Zolan, you must go check her out. She is so funny. She is she's so good at like character work. She's so good at improv. She's so good at stand up and writing and like copywriting. She's just really this phenomenal comedic brain, but she's also just a lovely human being as a person. And she's gorgeous. Like if you see her, she's like this Greek goddess, she's beautiful. But we became friends. I met her here in Los Angeles and we became friends. And then, during the pandemic, obviously it was a really tough time for everybody. And we were talking a lot and we were just like, we need something that's this island of just pure positivity for nothing else other than being positive. And we just wanted to connect and we couldn't physically be in the same place. And we wanted to like put it out to the world. So we decided the first iteration was we decided we were going to go onto Instagram live every Wednesday at 10 o'clock and each have things that we wanted to talk about that were like our shout outs. So things that were making us happy that week. And that was it. That was the whole premise. And so we
Yeah.
would get on and it was kind of phenomenal to see how many people loved it and then would like tune in every Wednesday at 10 to make sure that they were on Instagram, to make sure that they could join. We had people from all over the world, like a huge contingent from South Africa that was always like in and on it. And we kind of became this community. And then and so it was wonderful. And then Dynasty Typewriter, who's the theater here, they were doing shows online and they said, "Hey, why don't you come on our platform and we can produce it for you and have it looking sleek and cool." So we did that for a while. And then that ended. And then we turned it into a podcast where we ended up having a guest on to come and bring some shout outs of their own and then bring a mantra. And it was a person who maybe they were in the entertainment business, maybe they were a singer, maybe they were an actor, maybe they were a coach, maybe they were whatever it was. So I think we had my dad on to one of them, and he's an engineer professor. So it could be really anyone who just wanted to come and share the positivity. But it was so funny and so fun and just created this expansion of light and positive energy that was so needed for us. And then
Mm-hmm.
now I'm hearing from other people who've listened to it that it was so needed for them too. Like it really touched a lot of people that we were just doing it because we needed something for ourselves. It was like therapy for us, but it was so relatable because everybody needed something positive at the time. So we sum it up by, the picture for us, our thumbnail to identify our podcast and all of the streamers is a cartoon version of Sophia and I throwing up rainbows. And we're like, that's kind of the show. We just barf out rainbows. Like that's, and have a laugh. And it's not toxic positivity. It's okay if things are going
Mhm.
badly, but like finding some good in that. So yeah, if it's we're gonna talk about starting it back up because it's been on hiatus for a little bit, but we're gonna talk about starting back up in the new year because I think we both just miss seeing each other more often because it's how it is. It's hard to see people all the time, especially for me when I have two young kids. But
Mhm.
it's just so nice to consistently be in positivity and have something to look forward to where you just get to sit in positivity. So, yeah, it's the best. Podcasts are great, and positive
It's
podcasts are the best.
absolutely, and it's so strange, like coming from being a comedy fan, not ever being willing to dip my toes into the world of comedy. I would reach out to comedians I liked, but I very much am someone who understands like artists and public figures. They appreciate compliments. They don't appreciate stalkers. Um, so you can go and say, "Hey, I really like your work." Leave it there.
Right.
They might say thank you, they might not, but you don't need to push past there. And if you do, chances are they'll get uncomfortable. But if you have a podcast, then you can talk to
Oh,
whoever
I
you want.
see. That's so true. It's so true. I was just gonna say, we just, as performers, we all want to hear our own voice. We're just all egomaniacs, right? So you're like, oh, thank you for the compliment, but stay away. Oh, wait a minute, you want to broadcast me to people who I don't know? I'm into it. Like it's very funny. It is very funny.
So, just touching on that positivity, I mean, you are pursuing two of the most notoriously like difficult, some would describe as soul crushing professions, comedy and acting. Are just like, there's so many people who want to do it. It's something like 98% of actors don't make their living as actors or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like staying positive, has sort of helped you push through that and keep going after those roles? Or do you feel like that sometimes you sort of lack that shell that some people have?
I mean, I think it's both. I also feel disappointed and sad. It's not, I'm not like some robot who's like, everything is good. I'm
Yeah.
happy all the time or something. I've felt jealousy before. And like, that's just human nature. I think that the big thing about this profession is if you're going to be in it, and it's very soul crushing. As an actor, you are hearing, it's not like, oh, you're going to hear no a lot. Like, you're almost exclusively going to hear no. And not just no, but like, no, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too, like, you're
Mm,
going to be picked apart. And as a comedian, you're going to have a lot of times where things don't go well, and people are going to make these anonymous comments on anything you post that are horrible. Like when I posted my album, people like out of the woodwork who I've never met came out and were like just being horribly racist. And I'm like, but did you think it was funny? Like, I'm like, what does this have to do with anything? So you're putting yourself out there in these ways. And I think that the only way that you can endure, and not just endure, but like survive and thrive, is if you have a life that is worth living.
mm,
Because if the worst case scenario is you love this profession and you want to do it, and if you never get booked on another comedy show or you never get booked on another TV or movie, did you still enjoy your life? Is the question I have. And if the answer is no, then like start enjoying. Start like doing the things that you like to do, be around the people you like to be around, and continue or stop. Like there's lots of ways to make money. There's lots of ways to become famous. Like you
mhm.
can
Yeah.
become notorious if you want. You can just do crazy shit and you'll be on the internet and like you'll have your 5 minutes of fame. Or go on a reality show. Or like there's
Mm,
so many different ways to be in this sort of business, in the spotlight. But if you're going to do it in this way, where you want to do stand up comedy, or you want to be an actor, or you want to be a writer, it behooves you as well to have a full life that you love, because then you have things to write about, or talk about, or pull from when you're
yeah.
acting. I think that's why often as actors and comedians and writers become seasoned and they have lived more full lives, they have more to contribute that is more relatable or deeper or more interesting or complicated. Not to say that if you're young, you can't have that, but I think as a broad stroke, generally, as people get older and are in the profession and doing well, it's because they become more, for lack of a better word, wise as a human, right? So I think that's the thing is my positivity for sure helps in that, because I'm going to approach things in a way that's like the more no's I hear, the closer I get to a yes, is sort of one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Because I know you're going to have a lot of rejection. But also, like, I love my life. I have two kids that are more important to me than any stupid stage or TV show or whatever. It, like, without a doubt, hands down, my kids over everybody. Like, fuck y'all. If it hurts my relationship with my kids or my kids, it really, without even a second of thought, does not matter to me, you know? And I think that became really solidified for me during the pandemic, where I was like, nothing else matters. You know, I was on
Yeah.
bed rest for my second pregnancy and couldn't get out of bed and had to like get passed over for a bunch of jobs where they're like, well, but maybe if you just did this thing. And it was like, no, I'm not, there's no way I would ever put this kid at risk inside of my body to
Hmm.
make money. They're like, but it's a lot of money. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's not, like, stop talking to me now because it doesn't, it's like becoming insulting. You know what I mean? So like, I think it's like a wonderful thing that like, I'm in a healthy relationship. I love my husband. I have like, wonderful friends. I go outside. I try to make time to meditate, like all this stuff. Obviously, I'm not trying to put this out there like, I have this perfect life and everything is great and grand. Like, I have bouts of anxiety. I have all this stuff, but it's the process of like, I'm in the process of healing. I'm in the process of getting to know myself. I'm in the process of trying to be present and enjoy the things that are in my life, and become closer and deeper in my relationships with all the people in my life. And that is more important than the work. But the work comes from all of this stuff that I'm investing in as far as creating a good life. So if no one ever hires me for anything again, on my deathbed, I'll go, yeah, but I had fun doing it. I had fun trying. I had fun auditioning. I had fun writing things and creating and whatever. And you're still an actor. You're still a comedian. You're still a writer, even if no one decides to choose you. So
Yeah.
I think that's important to remember in this business, and it's hard because the business is set up to make you feel like a piece of shit that's worthless. I mean, like, look at
Yeah.
all these strikes that are happening with the WGA and with SAG. Like, they're
Hmm.
like, we don't need you. We can have a robot do you. And you're like, my whole life is, is this like,
Yeah.
I give up, I make sacrifices for this. And the people who are the ones who are supposed to pick you and make you feel important are the ones who are literally saying, you're not worth money. You're not worth it. We don't need you. So,
Oh my
we have
gosh.
to
And
think about that.
yeah, I mean that my girlfriend has been following this a lot closer than I have, but she was just telling me the other day that like Disney suggested this thing that all background actors would come in, get paid for 1 day of work, and then in perpetuity they would own their
Yes.
likeness.
Yes. I'm like,
Just
unless they're literally offering them $5 million off the top, and even that's probably
yeah,
not enough. But unless they're offering them $5 million to do that 1 day, that is an absolutely absurd, even just suggestion that got past vetting and got put as an offer. Like, that's insanity to me. It's
and it shows
inhumane,
just how crusty and just how white some people can truly be.
right? Bob Iger is a vanilla crusty cone. I'm putting it out there. Oh man. I'm never gonna work for Disney. No, you know what I mean? Like, it's fine. It's fine.
Hey, you got Peacock, and as far as I know, I don't think they're owned by Disney yet. So
I have no clue. I'm like, I say what I say. What are you gonna do?
so I feel like I should definitely at least bring this up. You were just on based on a true story. I would love to talk to you a little bit about that experience, starting with what was the audition process like?
Well, so two things. I would love to talk about it, and I can't talk about it in a way of promoting just because we are on strike. But I will tell you about
Sure,
the process as far as an actor is concerned and like all that kind of stuff.
absolutely.
Um, the auditioning is such a funny thing because especially now it's so hybrid where you're going in for auditions. There's a lot of self-tape stuff happening, a lot of Zoom stuff happening. So this one was a self-tape that I did, and at the time I was in New Hampshire with my family in the middle of nowhere, um, on this farm that we were in, like this house that is like an old kind of cabiny house from the 1800s. And I had this audition. I was like, oh, totally forgot about it. It's a really cool role. But it was like the logistics of like getting someone to take care of our kids and all that stuff so we could go do it was just so much. And at one point, my husband was like, do you even really want this? Like, do we have to do this one? Can we just skip this one?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's so funny, and it's, and so we did it. They put the kids down, and we had like old lamps that we were like aiming toward me, so we would have light. Like it was like such a shoddy setup. It was so funny. And then I kind of forgot about it, and I didn't hear anything back. And that's, as an actor, that's sort of what I do, is I do my best, and I like lay it all on the line, and then I kind of like move on, and you forget about it. And if something comes back, you're like, oh right, yeah, woohoo, wonderful, like that's great. But and I didn't hear anything back. And then I did this Zoom audition as my callback a month later. And it was going to be with not just our casting, Rona Crest, who's amazing, but with Craig Rosenberg, who wrote it, and with Alex Buono, who was an executive producer and who was directing some of them, and with a couple other execs and people from Aggregate Media. And it was like very bizarre to go from a self tape to a Zoom with all of these people. And also in the very beginning of the Zoom, I'm not the most tech savvy, and I had it and I was like ready, but I couldn't see anyone but me. And so I thought that they had made it like that. So I was like, oh, okay, cool, that's fine. And then people started talking. And I was like I literally was doing this. I was like, oh no, am I speaking to you guys? Like what? And then like, cause they were all like, oh, what do you think of all stuff? And I was like, I can't see any of you. And they're like, well, we're all here. And it was just like embarrassing moment of me being like, okay, hold on. I'm going to press the button and see if this works. And like finally got it where I could see. And there was like all these people there. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. So, the first, it was very like shit show comedy to start off with. And then I did it, and it was really, really fun. And it was just such a joy and so much fun working with those guys. But yeah, the audition process is it's just so wacky. Sometimes it feels very like, oh, like I got to do my thing. I got to do my art. And sometimes you're like, they'll be on their phone, like not even looking at you. And you're like, am I just how you get through your day? Like, are you even noticing that there's a person here? Like, it's just
Yeah.
so bizarre sometimes, but it's fun. Like, I have fun with it because I'm like, we just get to go and act. And like, as a child, I remember making like audio plays with my brother on like cassette. My
Yeah.
mom had one of those old cassette, and you're like, and now for the whatever, like making voices and all this stuff. And I'm like, I get to just like go in and do that as my job. And I might not be getting paid well, I'm definitely not getting paid every time I go into audition for something, but it's just like I get to play is my job. I get to play, and it is tough and it is hard, and there's lots of horrible stuff that I don't like about it, but it's so much fun. I can't believe
Mhm.
that I get money for this ever. It's great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I mean, I think talking to any type of performer that is able to make their living off of performing, whatever type of money they're making a living as a performer, which is something that so few people can say they do. And
Yeah.
you can really tell people are grateful for the opportunity to do that, whether it is making them rich and famous or just enough to float by.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting, the stats about the people in the union here in SAG-AFTRA,
Hmm.
that, to make, America, I don't know, where are you based? Sorry, I keep saying this as if like
I'm in
you live in
Columbus.
Canada. Oh, in Columbus. Okay. So, as a Canadian, for me, the idea of healthcare and like having to pay is so foreign.
Hmm.
And so I have to really wrap my brain around this, and that, in our union, in order to get healthcare, in order to have the privilege of paying into a healthcare program, right? Because my Canadian friends are like, well, then you get it. And I'm like, actually, no, then you have to pay money and then be a part of this. And you still have to pay money every time. And they're like, what is the system? And I was like, I know, it's crazy. But like, but like, in order to get your health insurance, you have to make, I think it's like $27,000 in a 4-quarter period, right? So it depends on what quarters we're talking about for each actor. But 87% of the people in the union do not hit that threshold.
Wow.
So, that's a pretty low, especially here in LA. Like, I think it's
Hmm.
like, make $70,000 in LA as a single person, you're considered low income or something. It's like something ridiculous.
Wow.
So, $26,000. A majority of people are not making that in this
Hmm.
union. And people tend to think like actors, oh, you're you're famous, you're living this life or whatever, it's luxury and all this stuff. And it's like, it's really not for most people. It's a grind, it's difficult. People have to have other jobs, they have to like hustle hard to make ends meet. Um, and truthfully, the people who are having the most like the best time, I think, in this industry are the people who are not famous, who are consistently working in smaller
Mm-hmm.
roles on long runs on small roles on TV shows, who you would not recognize them if you were standing next to them necessarily in a coffee shop, but they're the ones, or people who work in commercials like Flo from
Yeah.
Progressive. My God, like you want to make money, go be a spokesperson for something like she's a gazillionaire at this point, you know? But like
Yeah.
that's the thing that people forget is it's a very small percentage of anybody in this industry who is famous.
Mm-hmm.
And they're making, yeah, top dollar, big bucks. But like most people who are working consistently are never going to be famous. And that's fine. They're making good money. They're able to support their family. They're able to do their art. They're able to like pick and choose and all this kind of stuff. And the vast majority are people who just love it and are doing it and not making their full living at it, but they are still in the profession because of that. Like you love it enough that it's worth it. But yeah, it's kind of wild and fascinating, the perception of it versus the reality of being an
Yeah.
actor or a comedian or a performer or a writer of any kind.
Absolutely. And so if any of this broaches into the territory of crossing boundaries
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
strike,
I'll let you know. I'm very unclear about what everything is exactly, but I'm trying to like abide by. I'm not out
yeah,
here promoting a show and making the big wigs money.
absolutely. And trust me, this show will not make them very much money. But I did want to just touch on, because I've grown up watching this actress from the time she was 21 on Big Bang Theory. What was
Oh
it
yeah.
like doing scenes with Kaylee Cuoco?
Kayla's amazing. Like I will just put that out there as a period at the end. She is amazing. She is so generous. She is so kind. She is so welcoming. Like day one, she was like, "Come on, girls!" Like she was just like, "We're all friends," you know. And she's phenomenal. She's super funny. She's very like professional and commanding and like empowered in her role as a lead actor and as an executive producer. And that's all impressive. And in addition to that, the thing that really got me was she was actually pregnant the whole time in
Really, my girlfriend was
reality.
wondering that.
Yes, so she was pregnant, and and I've been pregnant twice. One easy pregnancy, one very hard pregnancy. So to watch a woman lead, you know, our cast, and to be part of the kind of production, who was pregnant and with a belly and walking around like, making things happen, making things easier for us. Like I remember at one point she was like, "This is too cold. The girls are wearing outfits that are going to be not, they're, it's too cold for us to be. You need to get heaters in here or something." And meanwhile, she's pregnant. And we're like, "No, but you should be sitting down and like we should get a heater and we want to take care of you." She's just like a lovely, hardworking, funny woman who like I kind of love. Like she was also like unapologetic. She knows
Mhm.
her worth and she's
Oh
like
yeah.
very passionate about making sure that like there's a good product at the end. So yeah, I loved it. She's wonderful.
I mean, she should definitely know her worth. I think she spent like 2 or 3 years as the highest paid actress on the planet. So
Oh
she, I mean,
really?
yeah, she was at the peak of Big Bang Theory, and something I thought was really cool that all three, her, Johnny Galecki, and Jim Parsons did, was they were making so much money, and at a point where they wanted to cut Raj, Howard, and Bernadette off the show,
Mm,
so they, her, Johnny Galecki, and Jim Parsons all took pay cuts to keep them on the show.
amazing.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I'd heard good things of her. Obviously, never spoken to anyone who's gotten to work with her. And then the
Yeah.
last thing I want to touch on just with this show is, I really really liked it. I don't like true crime. I was immediately hooked into the show. It's such a strange idea for a show. One problem with it: not enough Aisha Alpha in it. I would say. You're honestly some of my hardest laughs in the show where just like you're passing lines. Like there's like a one scene where you guys are in like a little gossip circle and you're looking at Kaylee's sister in the show, and you're like, so young and hot and young and
Yeah, I'm like, I really hope that they can sort out get a fair deal with the strikes for our writers and for our performers, because I would love to have a second season. It was the real dream come true. So I will take this moment to just say, I really hope that the strikes get sorted soon and
absolutely.
fairly, because it's so important. Like, that's exactly it, right? Like, our industry provides entertainment for people that like is part of their life, right? Like, you think back to like your childhood and the things you watched and how that like formed who you are and what you wanted to do and who you saw on TV and stuff. And like, it's not even just like entertainment, it's really part of culture, it's part of history, it's part of who we are. So this idea that
Absolutely.
we are unnecessary as actors or as writers, or that big networks and studios can do without us, is it's insulting and it's sad, and it's like we also are part of their lives and their families' lives. So it's kind of like funny for us to be told we're not important. Um, so hopefully it can be worked out soon, fairly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of my favorite things about both of these strikes is that they've called on non-performers, non-entertainers to work with their unions. They're saying, this is not just us being marginalized. There
Yeah.
are so many groups of people right now, and if performers can band together like this, other groups should be able to do it too. And so I think it's awesome that
Absolutely. Well, and I
yeah.
think one of Dwayne Perkins, who is an amazing comedian and writer, and he posted something. I don't even know if it was, I think it was his words that he was talking about, but he was saying, when people look at this, at the actors and the writers, I think from the outside, sometimes they think, oh, these people make a lot of money, and so why are they complaining? And the truth is, when we do make money, it is a good chunk, but we
Mhm.
generally aren't working. We're basically unemployed, and every once in a while we get a stint of employment, right? So like that has to cover sometimes years for people, those like few episodes or
Yeah.
a season or whatever you do. But even more importantly for us is like the money is important, but like the AI implications that they want, like you said, using a background worker for one day and then having their image to recreate anything they want in perpetuity is like cuckoo bananas. And the idea, like, it's just insane. And the idea that, like, that's not just our industry. I think this is just the most, we're seeing this showcased the most because this is we're seeing it on the
Mhm.
news, we're talking about it. But
Yeah.
every job is at risk. Every person who works, every person who makes money through work, every person who has a creative passion is at risk
Mhm.
of then abuses of AI. Obviously, AI is already in our world and is helping us in certain ways and things, but like, doctors are going to be replaced by AI. Every worker in every factory, in every town, in every restaurant, like everything will be replaced by AI. So this is
Mhm.
a very slippery slope for all of us. So we all need to come together and put some regulations. Even the people who made AI like broke their contracts to be like, we need to stop. We're sorry. We have to undo, we have to
Yeah.
undo this. We did not realize it was going to turn into this. Like, it's like that for me is a sign of like, we're going too far. We must stop. We must pull back. So, yeah, I think for me, I'm like, money's great and money's important and money is a way of showing your worth, even though it's not the real way of showing your worth. But
Yeah.
like for me, the real thing is the AI stuff. The AI component for me is the thing I hope we do not back down on, because it's going to be impossible to rein it back. Now is the time to stop it.
Absolutely. Things are definitely starting to feel a little dystopian.
Yes, yes. I'm like, luckily, I'm nice to all the robots in my life. I'm Canadian. I say please and thank you to all of them. So when they take over, at least I'd be like, oh, she's cool. She's cool. Don't worry about her. Let's not kill her and her family.
We have a couple of Alexas, and my girlfriend absolutely hates them. And I'm like,
Oh,
be nice. They're listening.
I know. I'm like, I legit, and I kid you not, I say please and thank you every single time I ask it to do anything. And it makes it harder for it to understand what I'm saying, but I refuse to not. I'm like, I must be kind. Yeah.
You got this. You got this. All you listeners.
Tell your friends, robots.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're having half as much fun listening to this podcast as I had making it. That wraps up the getting to know you portion of the podcast. And before we start talking comedy, I want to remind everyone to go check out 4x3. They drop awesome original comedy content every week on their YouTube channel, youtube.com/@ FOURXTHREE. Or you can find it by looking up 4x3 on YouTube. Let's get back to the show. So the first question I'll ask you is, what did you want to be when you were a kid?
Oh man, so many things. I have a joke about this actually, how I really wanted to be a prostitute.
And you denied all those opportunities as a
I
life
know,
coach.
I know, right? What was I thinking? But yeah, because I think when I was a kid, I heard I have a full on joke about this. How I was trying to figure out what was a prostitute, and I remember my mom telling me it was somebody who has sex for money, and I remember knowing money was good, and knowing that sex was this thing that I wasn't allowed to talk about, but that it was like mysterious and good. And so I was like, well, there you go. Why wouldn't I want to do that thing then? Like, why aren't we all just doing prostitution? And so, and then it's like as you get older, you find out more about all the things and like, oh, okay. So, and I'm pro sex work. I'm like, it's all good, but it's not for me. But it's like that's a funny thing. I wanted to be a prostitute and I wanted to be a maid. What was I seeing as a child? That's what I want to know. That this is
I was
like, what was I
wondering
watching?
the same thing in the mean streets of Canada.
I know it was ridiculous, but yeah. Yeah, those I never wanted to be a performer. I didn't really realize that I had access to that as a profession. My mom has her PhD in microbiology, and my father has his PhD in engineering. So as you can
So
imagine, I wasn't
they
like
were
surrounded
delighted.
by performers. It's so funny because they are very supportive of my brother and I. My brother's a musician and a radio host,
Oh,
and
wow.
I am a comedian, actor, writer. Um, but their big thing is you must find your passion and then pursue it. So if your passion is basket weaving, you must learn to be the best basket weaver, or at least try to be the best version of your basket weaving possible. And my brother enrolled in engineering for some time, I think to kind of, we were both great in school, but he obviously didn't want to do that. But I think it's like a way of being like, look, I'm making you proud, Dad. And my dad was like, what are you doing? Like, we all know you want to be a musician. Just go do that thing then, And it was like, oh, okay, cool, cool, cool. But yeah, so I the first time I realized you could actually take drama or any performance in school was when I was in university and I was
Wow.
making my choices for my electives and I saw drama and I was like, are you kidding me right now? People are taking drama and people are taking chemistry. Like these people are both university students at the same, like this is crazy to me. And so I enrolled in a drama class and I played soccer in university and we missed the first couple days of school because we were playing in our preseason tournament. And I went to class and did this drama class and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I had so much fun. The teacher pulled me to the side afterwards and was like, oh, we have like a hard, fast rule that if you miss any classes, you get expelled from the course. And so because I'd missed the first class because of playing varsity and I had told them, but no one mentioned it to me from the department, I got kicked out of the class after the first class I went to. And I was like,
Oh
screw drama. That's bullshit. So, fast forward to now and here I am. But yeah, I had no clue. I had no clue it was an option for me until I got this far along in life and sort of found myself stumbling backward into this profession.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I mentioned this before we started the podcast, but I just had my first open mic last week, and
Yay!
it was an absolute blast. I went with a friend who did comedy, and I only the host of the open mic and the person I came with and me knew that it was my first time going. I told
Okay.
the host, kind of thinking she would tell people as I went up, and then she
Uh-huh.
didn't. She pulled me aside after, and she was like, "I just." Like we did a workshop ahead of time, so she heard that I had, at least some idea of what I was doing. I gave a couple people suggestions on their jokes, so I think she got that I was not completely
Yeah.
unfamiliar with the concept of comedy.
Right.
But she was like, you told me it was your first time. I wanted to give you a chance to do it and have them not treat you differently. And so I went up there, and I would say I got laughs. I got laughs almost everywhere I wanted to get laughs. But what
Good.
was cool is I got laughs in a couple of places I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
Um,
Did it put you off? Were you like, whoa, wait a minute?
oh yeah, absolutely. I was like, oh crap! I'm glad I'm really glad I have this recorded because like my brain is moving so fast. I have no idea what about that just made them laugh, but
Yeah.
they just laughed when I wasn't expecting them to. I also didn't give anybody time to laugh. I go right into the next
Yeah, you're like,
joke.
move on, move on. Yeah, no.
Yeah. But so at this point, now that I tested out a 5 minute set, and know I will be continuing to do open mics and stuff, what would be your advice for me at this point?
I mean, I think it's really great. I don't know how everyone else works, but I love to record my sets, whether it's audio or video, because I feel like it's the same thing. I kind of black out on stage where I do a
Yeah.
lot of improv kind of stuff. And sometimes I'm like, oh, what did I say of that thing? And it was funny and I didn't expect it to be funny, like you're talking about. So, like, that has been really helpful to me to have that. Sometimes, like, for most of them, I don't go back and listen because it's pretty standard or I remember or whatever. But sometimes I'll go back and be like, what was that thing I said? And it's so helpful. Um, and then just like I do it, right? People are like, should I like read more books or do this? And it's like, I don't know. I've never read books on comedy. I didn't like study comedy. I just did it, and it was so fun because then you get more comfortable. You get to practice. You feel there's less like anxiety about like arriving at the place. I don't know if you felt that, but the first time I did,
Oh yeah.
an
Oh
open
yeah.
mic, the first time I was going to do it, I sat across the road at a crepe place, eating a crepe by the window, looking out the window at the place I was going to go to, and I did not go in. I went home after I ate my crepe. So, like that kind of anxiety about just approaching physically a space where this is going to happen. So the more you do it, the more that anxiety gets replaced with excitement and with fun. And for me, this is the most key is finding your like true crew,
Mhm.
that will make you feel like you are part of a community because it is so on your own when you are doing stand up. And it doesn't even have to be people who have the same sense of humor as you, but it's just like people who you get on with and can be your full self, people who you feel like you can fail in front of, people who you feel like you can be excited about something and it doesn't feel like you're bragging and they're not going to be jealous or mad about it.
Yeah.
People who will like be happy for your successes and be there for you when you're having a hard time is probably the most important thing that I have found in stand up because it is so hard and it's so lonely at times that you need that like off stage. It's like kind of like the back of the room stuff where you sit in the back of the room and you joke with your friends and like make fun of each other or like add lines to someone's set that's on stage. That's what you want is to feel that community in the back of the room.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think I've been most excited about. Coming from being an adult in Columbus, I came here for OSU, and then I graduated a few years ago. We went right into the pandemic, so a lot of my friends moved home. I stayed here
Yeah,
with my girlfriend. But as an adult, there aren't a lot of places where it's easy to make friends, especially just like
totally.
showing up at my first open mic, I stood around in a group of like in a circle with a group of people I had known for all of an hour, like like I hadn't done since I was like a teenager, just shooting the shit.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see. Like, I've been told by all of the comedians that I've spoken to so far, there really is that sense of community, and people really do. They see you, they want to be your friend, especially if they connect with some of your jokes.
Yeah.
But to just go in and immediately experience that to an extent was really cool.
Yeah. I think comedy is one of those places that does bring you back to like school, being a um,
Hmm.
school age where you can just approach someone and be like, I liked your joke. It's like going to someone and being like, I also have liked your
Yeah.
joke when you're four, right? Like you're like, it's that easy to approach people. Um, and it is hard to make friends, but like that's that's gonna be the people who get you through all of this stuff. That's gonna be the people that you have at your wedding, you know what I mean? Like down the road
Yeah.
because you're gonna live part of your life with these people as your chosen family, which is so cool. And the other thing is like you don't have to have that relationship with everybody that you meet. You can be
Mhm.
like comedy cool with people, but not necessarily dive deeper. And that's okay. Like some of the guys who I've known for a long time in comedy, all of a sudden one day we're like, do you have any siblings? Like, we don't know. We just talk about this other
Yeah.
stuff. Like, what is your life? But yeah, there's something beautiful about just, I mean, and also all the drama that comes with being school age is also there in the stand-up world, the comedy
Yeah.
world. But you've gone through it once, you can do it better the second time of like as an adult dealing with it all. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing to be able to be a part of a community of people who are being so vulnerable. But have you get to have fun. It's great.
So I just have a few more questions for you here, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
What do you love about comedy?
I love to laugh. When I see people do comedy and it makes me laugh, it's 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 the best. Like I just did a show where the host, he just basically he did an hour-long special with other comedians popping in. That's what it felt like. He was so funny and so he didn't even care. He could have gone on for 45 minutes in between comedians and he had
Wow.
everyone in the palm of his hand and it was so funny. And I didn't know anybody really at the show. It was a new show I was doing and I was sitting in the back and I had done a set and it was okay, not great. But like
Mm.
I was sitting at the back of a dark club with sticky floors, with like a bunch of people I didn't know, enjoying myself
Hmm.
immensely, which is not something, if you take away the comedy from that, it sounds creepy. Like it's like,
Yeah.
it's when something is funny, it's a magical, healthy, wonderful, soul affirming thing. And also I love attention. I'm like, I'm just going to put it out there. I love attention. I get to be on a stage with a microphone and everyone's looking at me. Yes, please, more thank you. Like it's a dream come true. And it's a space
Absolutely.
where I get to like have my full perspective and no one can take that away. It's not something I've written that someone's going to edit and change for TV or
Hmm.
film. It's not somebody else's words that I'm going to try and make my own. It's literally my own thoughts and feelings. And unless someone comes with a hook and pulls me off stage, you're going to hear what I have to say, which is a really it's a wonderful thing for humans in general, but I think especially as a woman, especially as a black woman, it's just like there are there are now more and more, but there's few historical places where people said, "Oh yeah, we want to hear everything that you have to say, good, bad, and ugly. Come here and yell it out to this crowd." So that's a very empowering thing to be a part of.
Absolutely. That was one of the coolest things about being part of the workshop before the open mic was seeing people comfortable going up and just like doing very unfinished, not even very funny jokes and not
Yeah,
feeling embarrassed, just being like, what do you guys where should I take
yeah,
it? And it's so cool how well they took the feedback too. Like people are like,
yeah.
oh yes, that's good, and they're writing it down, and that's so cool to me.
And that takes a lot of trust too. Because I
Hmm.
think there's times when, as a comedian, you're going to get people who don't get you or what you're saying or what you're talking about, trying to insert themselves into your comedy. And this happens all the time after shows. A bunch of dudes will come and be like, "You should say this," and I'm like, "I'm not you, man. Like, I'm not going to be like big tits at the end of my set. Like, I'm like, that's not me." So, but when you trust people and you value and they get you and you're working
Hmm.
together, like the community thing, it's a wonderful thing to be able to get someone to be like, I got one of my best tags recently from a guy who I know and love and think is so funny. He was like, yeah, take it or leave it, but like this could also be a funny way, and it's brilliant. And like he gets me and knows me, and it added so much value to what I was saying, and really was the thing I'd been searching for, I think. And he just put it in a wonderful way that was like, that's the thing, that's exactly what I want. Yeah, like it was such a win. It was great.
And it's so wonderful because sometimes when you're stuck on an idea like that, it becomes so difficult to think about it differently.
Yes, exactly. That's so well put. You are too deep in it to see it from the outside.
Yeah. So is there anything you hate about comedy?
um, I mean, I don't know if I hate, but the the lows of having a bad set and how it can really make you feel like it can rock your world as far as your self-esteem
Hmm.
and confidence. I don't think I hate that. It's just part of it that's very uncomfortable. That I'm trying to find more comfort in. I think part of it is I hate I hate that sometimes comedy is in conflict with my family life personally
Hmm.
for me because I really love going to get up, but I also love my family more than anything. So sometimes it can make me feel like I have to choose. That's one of the things that was lovely. I think I was one of the very few comedians who will ever say this, but I really loved doing Zoom comedy shows because I could step away from my family for 15 minutes, do a set, and
Mhm.
then be right back in there. Um, so, but you don't get the same. It's not the same. It's like comedy light. You
Mhm.
don't get the audience feeling and energy, but it is tough, I think, at times, and it's getting easier for me. But when I was breastfeeding and my kids, I needed my body for survival, and I was at shows like having to go back and pump breast milk,
Mhm.
and then all of that stuff um, makes it tough, and sometimes made me feel like, oh, is this the thing I should be doing right now? Should I take a break and come back? But I persevered and just talked about it on stage, and it was a great outlet for me. So I think I don't really think there's anything I hate about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it necessarily.
Mhm.
But there's parts that are challenging and that are tough, um, that I have
For sure.
to wrap my head around.
Yeah, as with all professions.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so my final question for you today, Aisha. If you were to teach a comedy workshop, what would be your primary focus?
I think my primary focus would be on giving giving a space for people to tell the worst possible joke they could think of. Like, give me your cheesiest, most horrible, like racist, sexist, misogynistic, like bigoted, whatever that's inside of you, giving space for that. Because I feel like that's the thing that I struggle with. And I think that as we get into comedy, the thing that we're like worried about is that we're accidentally going to be so into something and then realize it's horrible, right? That we should never have said it. And there's this whole culture, of digging back into the past and taking something you said, and then if it's horrible, it's horrible, but like sometimes taking things out of context or whatever. But that's a scary prospect, to eliminate the danger of going too far or saying something that can be offensive. So creating space for that to live with no judgment, I think would be really freeing for everybody. I mean, in this profession for sure, but also just in life, like a retreat where you can just say whatever the
Yeah.
fuck you want to say and then come back to real life. But um yeah, I think, but it's like, it's about finding spaces where that's why a community is so important, where you say something on stage and you're like, I can't believe I said that. And they're like, yeah, you shouldn't say that again. But like, I don't hate you. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you need that. But finding that space to feel safe, I think, to be
Mhm.
your worst version of yourself and work things out so that you can get to the good stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I will say, I witnessed a little bit of that going on in this workshop. Somebody work somebody workshopped a joke that was all of his similarities with Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I
So that,
mean,
that
and it's like, this is what I always say. I'm like, there's nothing that's off the table. There is no topic that is unfunny. Like, I've heard a lot of people say, like, rape jokes are not funny. And I'm like, I think that that is a real denial of humanity. And I think that also limits people who, for example, have experienced that and want to talk about it or whatever, right? I think it's very hard to write a funny rape joke. That is a very
absolutely.
difficult thing to do. And chances are you are going to write an offensive joke most of the time. But we should never eliminate this space to talk about these things, because that is some of the stuff that brings us all together, is being able to like
Mhm.
work out tragedy through comedy and talk about things in a way that people can eventually laugh about some portion of it, because we're all in this together, we're all experiencing it in our own ways, but it's the same experience of life. um, and you cannot censor people into thinking
Mhm.
rape doesn't exist or racism doesn't exist or tragedy doesn't exist, death doesn't exist. Like, it's sort of, it really is limiting and detrimental to all performers and all of art and all of creativity, and kind of, to be woo woo about it, it's detrimental to the universe and all the people in it, to try and limit the human experience.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and and not to touch on that too much, but I just think it's comedy is a little bit of like, it's sort of like a litmus test for the society of the world, you know, like
Hmm.
you see in the 1980s, one of the most controversial things to talk about was gay people. You see people like Eddie Murphy, like you could tell how much emphasis he's putting on like that F word and,
Hmm.
just the different things he's saying. It's because that was at the height of popularity. Now, flash forward 43 years later, or however long, and that's been very normalized into our society, and people are a lot more comfortable talking about it. I think
Yeah.
it's the same thing with like trans rights. It starts out with people making some pretty offensive jokes about it. And then you have
Yeah.
that next wave of comedians writing really intelligent jokes about it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Jim Jeffries, but he had one of the most shockingly polite, educated jokes about trans people, and it was just coming from the fact that he was like, anybody who's trans, anybody willing to surgically remove their genitalia has a good story, and I want to hear
Right. Yeah.
it.
I mean, I did a workshop, not a workshop. There was a class, a comedy class that a friend of mine, Poet HP, was doing in Toronto, and he asked if I would come and do like a guest, class. And I was like, I don't know how to teach comedy, man. I don't know what I'm doing. And he's like, no, like let's just like we'll work things out. We'll workshop it. We'll do like the back of the room sort of stuff we all do. And there was one participant who was trans, and he was talking about, he there was this assignment that Ford had given them about like a very specific thing to just like work out different types of comedy and stuff. And he came to the assignment with like very specific perspectives that felt very inauthentic. And
Mm,
so when I sort of prodded and was like, "What does this come from? What are you trying to say here?" And he went on this rant about how he hates toxic masculinity, and as a person who is trans, that is what he is suffering from a lot when there is bigotry coming at him. And also at the same time, he feels like he's trying to act masculine in a way to show that he is a man, and he tends to veer into toxic masculinity. And he went off on this rant, and I was dying laughing, right? And I was like, this is what you need to talk about on stage. And it was like the real experience of the humanity of trying so
yes.
hard to not be a thing and then becoming that thing was so fucking funny and like so relatable, right? To so many people, whether you are trans or a man or whatever. Like it's just like we don't want to be our parents, and we try so hard, and then one day you hear yourself saying the thing to your parents, and you're like, no. But like that's the thing where you're like that is why we should never limit anyone from talking about anything, because that's the beauty, that's the fucking gold that will come from making it a blank slate, and then having the caveat that like it might not be funny though. Like you have to live with the fact that you might be saying, if you're going veering into that, it might be very offensive and not funny. You have to find the authentic funny for you. Um, but yeah, it's wild when it works out, because it's like, and now only he can tell that joke. There is nobody else who can
Of
tell that
course.
joke other than him, And it was such a joy to see that happen and see him be like, have this aha moment of like, oh snap, yeah, that is funny. Okay, cool. I'm gonna say that on stage. And you're like, yes. Yeah, brilliant.
All right, Aisha. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for talking to me. If you want to take a second just to plug any social media, any of your channels you want to, go
Yeah,
ahead.
please. First of all, I will just say this was an absolute delight. You are such a
So
delight.
glad.
You are so kind and generous and vulnerable, and it's like a wonderful thing to be around and bask in. Um, Thank you for all the research you did. That was very fun to like relive parts of life and part of this. So, thank you for all that. People can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Aisha Alfa, just my name, real easy. And I post about shows and about things that are happening there. Also, my website, aishaalpha.com, has videos. And when I do shows, I often post them on there as well. I don't know if my shows link is up right now. I think I took it down during the pandemic because there were no shows happening. So I was like, this is a lot of work for nothing. Um, but you can find me there. And I always tell people that feel free to reach out if you see my work and you have feelings or opinions about it, you liked it, you didn't like it, whatever. I love hearing from people. I love connecting with like people who are out there who see my work. And during the pandemic, I had people reach out, and then I would write back and be like, thanks for that, I really appreciate it, it really touches my heart. And they were like, oh, I didn't think anyone was ever going to read this. And I'm like, no, I'm a human being who's here on the other end. So I always encourage people to reach out, whether it's on social media or through the actual like connect with me link on my website where it sends me a message that you write. So but yeah, it's a wonderful thing, and I appreciate you putting this podcast on so people can hear about it and hear the process and get the real of it. And I appreciate you doing comedy and being the petrified comedian because we all are. So kudos to you, and congrats on your first open mic. That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna